Nice rolling joint design. Will act as the first draft of the finger. One ligament here going through all 4 rolling joint surfaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, single thread. Down here a separate one, and I suspect it could all be done with one, but this seems a pretty reasonable split. Last finger joint is melded into a single, but this piece could be many, many things, and I suspect the other thing is to make it detachable here. I mean, you can really make that into sensorized, soft touch, specialized, pointy, all sorts of stuff. So it will be very general purpose. I will release these immediately, ready to print, and have fun. Right, this is the new finger. However, this is a more up-to-date knuckle piece. This is now to be peeled. So shouldn't need that one, it's out of date already. Got one there. And ideally, you can start to lift an edge like that, and then you can get a blade in. You really want these, if you can manage it, to just pop off nicely, as it were. Ta-da! That's what you're after. I'm not convinced this one's going to do that because of the way it's printed, but if you've got a nice big flat expanse at the bottom, you can usually get the plastic to just shear nicely. And I think this one's going to do it. When you pull those off, you must be careful not to damage your raised surfaces. Those are your joint surfaces, so make sure the bite will not hit that surface, otherwise you'll leave a mark. I might peel this one from the front then. Oh yeah, that's going to go better. There you go. So if you get it right, it will just pop off, and that will give you the best surface finish. This one's a little awkward. I'll probably need a screwdriver. I wonder if I might get rid of the hole altogether. Particularly misjoin. Holes in the centre of joints are preferable for the fatigue life of cables. But one of the real design considerations is all to do with maintenance and assembly. So this hand, for example, is aimed very much at people that are going to build it themselves, and when it breaks, they're going to maintain it themselves. And that is a very different proposition to trying to set up a commercial, fully commercial, semi-commercial design and procedure for maintenance, which is administered remotely, which is what a company would have to do, of course. But that's what you're after. That's a nice, clean peel. See, the holes are largely clear. There's a little bit in there. You could either clean out with a drill or a screwdriver. But so long as the needle will pass, you could possibly use that even to push out the obstruction. Probably what you're most worried about. Okay, so that is the new knuckle joint. That is the new knuckle piece. You can see how those surfaces will mesh together and leave a gap for the crossing strings, and that is what's known as a rolling joint, which I've kind of done variations on before. There's I guess a variation on that, but I've not done a design which is solely based on them, and that was suggested actually off YouTube comments, so thank you very much. It's a neat way of doing it, and what I particularly like now is it means you don't have to buy any other components. What I really like about the SO arm is that it's very simple to buy the bits for. Now, a tendon-driven hand, you're clearly going to have to buy tendon, right? There's no way around that. But if everything else can be minimised, that seems a good plan. So the HOPELite, especially the hands, I'm going to try and do. I think, well, tendon, I think you're going to need PTFE. And you're going to need a spring. Although I have done some printed springs, but I don't know. So I don't think you can get away with less than 3. 2 would be really amazing. As in extra components you have to buy. That one came off nice and easy. Now regarding these, to get these to print perfectly, 3 layers, 3 layers, 2 layers, 3 layers, 3 layers, gap of, I remember now actually, 5 or 6. I mean 3, 3, 2, 3 and 3. That took many hours of messing around actually, because the slicer does weird things, or does different things rather, depending on whether or not you specify supports, and in the end I've had to specify that as being 1.48 millimeters. At 1.5 it gets 4 layers, and at 1.45 it gives you 2. But I just had to find that out by trial and error. So that is something which needs testing on other slicers. So if you're building this and you've got a slicer, I thought I might add a little video at that point to show what I mean on my slicer. Show me what you get, and the design can be tuned. Ta-da! That's what you're after. Right. So, how exciting. Brand new design. See, those curves are not the same, because the yaw is not very much movement. The knuckle, and for now, oh, I should have just printed another one. Let's get me going, get that. So yes, indeed, this finger is simplified further by only having 2 carpal joints. So I've made that one look like a tip. Makes it maybe a bit long, but that would look like that. So that's getting up to a reasonable size. Obviously my finger's a bit nearer to the camera. But yeah, I don't think that's bad. It's meant to be kind of child size. It looks nice. Right, so the one to put together first, what I'm curious about is the knuckle and that, because I think you can do that with a single line going through there, round here, doing those ones, out here, back through there. I think. Seems like you should be able to, but I don't know if you can, so let's find out. Yes, it starts there, and then it crosses and goes down. There. So that way, when you pull it tight, you can see you've got a cross. And then that is going to come back. Yes, it comes back and goes through the same one, but on top. So that gives you a cross. So that gives you a cross in there, and that's what sits in that top groove, that bottom groove. That's what sits in that bottom groove. Right, I think it'd be a very good idea to tie a knot off in this before it disappears. So that's just a figure 8 because they form a nice large knot, and it's easy to undo generally. Okay, now the way I want to do this is I want to have the crossing done in pairs. And what I mean by that is I want the inside of each. So this is why this is obviously not very suitable for production manufacture, because everything has to be done by hand. But like I said, this is aimed at people that want to build a complicated robot with very, very few different parts. Right, so you can see that in there now, right? That crosses over. So you're now going to come up to the top, and that's going to come across and go through that hole. And then you want it to go back so that the middle ones are together. And then that goes through that top hole. And now when you pull that tight, everything in the right place. You'll get a joint which is self-stable because the middle two are together. That needs to be a lot tighter, but that's the basis of how it works. And because the middles are together, if you twist it either way, it tends to self-bind. Whereas if you have them going the same way and you twist it one way, it'll lock up. You twist it the other way, the whole thing will come undone. Now, that shouldn't in some ways count because there's going to be another one down the bottom, so the joint shouldn't be able to twist that much. But it makes sense that all of the elements are inherently self-stable. But that will form, I think, a pretty decent joint actually. And once it's tight, it doesn't move that much. I might add some extra buttresses, as it were, or some little protrusions, top and bottom. It'll make the printing more awkward, but that's not a huge deal. But when it's all tight, I think it's probably okay. And I kind of like that in a sense that if it does take a big impact, there's nothing which can snap off. It'll all be taken by these. Now, at the moment, these are going to be crimped together using standard fishing crimps. But in the name of not using any extra components, I'll probably get towards something which is clamped down using the spare screws from the servos. But for now, they're quick and easy. Anyway, that's how that goes together. I'm now going to continue and see if indeed it can just keep going with the same line. I don't see why it couldn't. It's going to come into the, into the inside one again. Now we've got a knuckle. So that's going to go in the top. Ow. Don't stab yourself. They want to stay in the right channel. I don't think it's enormously important. It's going to loop around, go back in there again. Okay. and then it crosses up over top, back down there, and now this trick again where it goes in the same place. See that? And then down there. So just this one has popped across again. Fiddly, fiddly, fiddly. Once it's all done, it should be quite well behaved. Right, that is half a knuckle joint, pitch and yaw. Good God, this might actually work. Right, so that's going to come across to the inside, cross up over here, go down that hole, cross back on the inside, go down that hole, okay, and yes, then come across up over the top, down through the outside hole, cross back through the middle gap, down that hole, make sure that's in the right channel. I think it must cross at some point. Obviously it must cross at some point. And give that a pull. And that should make that joint very loose and as strong as, well, how many of those are there? 8. I mean, we're at an angle. Breaking strain is what? 80 pounds. So some in the region of 600 pounds to break that. The plastic will break first. That's strong, and it should last. That's very interesting. Right, one more to go. Okay, so right, wire. I'm gonna run out of line, aren't I? It's gonna be close. Right, so that is gonna go. Oh, it's got to go back to the bottom. How do I do that? Ho hum. This one could carry on. This one could carry on and do it, and I have indeed therefore not got enough string. Ah, it's a funny old game, isn't it? Nowhere near enough. Oh, I don't think so. How exciting. Let's see. This is so often the way. It's not quite how you think it's going to be. Anyway, not a big deal. It's just the first test one. And apart from that, yeah, it seems to be quite a nice design. Hey, that's just all sorts of annoying. I've changed my mind on figure 8 knots. Just generally not a fan of knots. They make the fibre about 50% weaker. And they just always look unprofessional. If you want to look like a professional, 2 things to avoid are knots and tape. Right. Oh, it's just not going to be long enough, is it? Oh, it's going to be so near, but it ain't going to be long enough. Huh. I really thought that would do that transition, but I can't do it twice. So that was what my noodle could not tell me that I had not seen. Even if I pull it all the way through, I'm not convinced there's enough. Oh, there is. There would be. All right, we'll do that. Not going to film that, though. Okay, I've now pulled all the extra thread that was at the needle end back through the system, and this is how much is left, so it will be enough to finish. But fiddly, fiddly. Very good. Okay. So, there you can see everything lines up. And I'm going to just remove the needle from this end. It's okay, because I'm going to use a crimp to connect these 2 bits together. So if in the future, or if you are copying this video and you are about to try and connect one of these together yourself, you're going to need a fair bit at that end. And I guess the sensible way to start is in fact to start at the lower one. Do both of those, take that corner there, and then when that one finishes there, the end will be... actually, we'll find out. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there is no way for it to mesh up. Ooh, let's find out. Right, so I'm going to have to put a needle on here. Now, the issue is all about sizing. These holes are consistently about 1.5, and if your needle gets much bigger, on this one, leave it at that. So if your needle gets much smaller than, say, 0.8, if your needle gets much bigger than 0.8, then when you've passed 2 of these down the hole, it's going to start to get a bit awkward. I think you could probably go up to a 1mm needle, which would make life a bit easier. And to get that through the eye of a 0.8 needle when itself is a 0.4, you're just going to have to kind of worry the ends a bit. So you get a nice spread. And that wants to be long enough that when you can use my needle itself, right? But when you push it through the eye, you've got enough to grab hold of. I don't think I've got a 1mm needle. I had a quick look. I didn't do a very thorough, to be fair. But this does work with a 0.8. It's probably not enough. I'm not keen on licking the ends of threads in the workshop because there's all sorts of bits of dust around, including carbon fibre particles, which I'd rather not ingest. Ta-da! Piece of cake. Okay, so as usual, I'm going to keep that in the middle. It's going to pass back like so. And go down. that hole. Okay. No, wrong place. What have I done? Yes, wrong place. This could get interesting. Oh, no, good. Sorry, it goes down inside the knuckle cross, not inside the knuckle. So it goes in the lower hole, goes in the lower hole there. Okay. Now obviously you can translate these sideways, which again I'm not seeing as a bad thing, because in the event of an unexpected impact, everything's just going to slide. Potentially that can be fixed with clamps and other methods, but for now, let's see how it works out. So pass back down through there. You're now going to cross that's annoying. To there, needle goes down there, and crosses back down the same hole, pull it to that side. It's going to go down that hole now. And then one last time, back through the middle. Down that hole. Okay. And that is the full thread pattern. And all I have to do now is work out how to get that to come back to that and form a loop, or end them separately. Okay. So servo will sit in here. Doesn't actually fit in this one, but that's not a problem. That is the knuckle yaw, and that is the knuckle pitch. And that is 3 pieces held together with hundreds of pounds of strength. I'm fairly sure, and I guess I will do some tests to find out, but I'm fairly sure that when this is really subjected to braking forces, the thread will remain intact and the plastic will end up just being ripped apart. Which is very good in the sense that you can move the plastic up, obviously, to much stronger materials. This is just PLA. This is weak as 3D printing goes, but you could print in very strong materials. I mean, that is a tremendously strong joint. Probably not suitable for productionizing or even commercializing unless you've got a lot of people making these. Or, of course, if we can get the robots to build these themselves, then that's a very interesting proposition. Something to think about. Right, for now, there's one last join to do. Need to make it diagonally across. That's not bad, is it? There they are. So that will be the join on that corner. So I will pull that a little bit tighter, possibly in a vise. Pop on a crimp. cut those two ends square again. Yes, let's do that. Awkward when you've got such short lengths, so next time I will definitely use a bit longer. And of course, foolishly, I did not measure the piece I used this time, so I don't know the length. But I will try and work something out. There we go. So now you can get yourself something nice and strong. Get a nice firm grip on that. And just work everything through its ranges. Just want to pull that until everything's gone a little bit crispy, so you know you've pulled it through. And you grab that crimp with another pair of pliers, and whilst you're pulling away, and be careful not to slip off and whack yourself with this one, right? So do not pull towards yourself. I mean, just crush that. Probably not using the best pair of pliers for that. But yeah, you can see, even pulling them out quite hard, I can't get much more. So I will now, it's only partially crimped, I suspect. So you can lever against it, like so. In fact, the way to crimp these is very carefully, so you don't cut all the way through. Get a lot more force on those jaws down there. You put a line across it. Ooh, that's nice. So that's the issue with twisting. And you see it largely goes back, just lost one there. That's not bad. Okay, so that's what I need fixing. Okay, so of course, somewhere in each of these there's a diagonal ligament cross, which isn't great. So that's gone quite loose. But nonetheless, particularly if you were to put, I don't know, I guess the other thing was a little bit of like a sleeving, put it inside a glove. In the human body, you've got capsules and all sorts of stuff going on. But that is a super loose, really not bad little finger joint. Yaw and pitch. Cheap as chips. Bit of string, 3 bits of print. I think that will last for millions of cycles. Okay, so progress. A knuckle to try out. That's yaw, that's pitch, and then there's just another finger segment to go. Exactly the same, much simpler. Another rolling joint there. Okay, I'm going to assemble this second finger joint. Keep track this time of how much ligament is used. 50, scissors gone. Seriously, how can they not be right in front of me? Using that stuff, £80 break. Make a little loop. end that's a little bit spread out already. Tease the fibres apart, flatten it down. And I generally have to flip my hands over at this point. Okay, need to cut a neater end, I think. So, starting with a neatly cut end, just squash the fibres flat and gather them a little bit back together. And that should go through there easily enough. Okay. The finger joint is going to just lace all the way down. So I'm going to start at the top here. Don't put that all the way through. Goes in the top there. It's going to go, and then it goes back down the top. It will form the first join, which will just give you something to pull it together. Like so. That one should be on the outside as well over here. So you come at the bottom of there, and I pass up here. So back in the top. And now when it goes back through to the top for the last time, make sure it goes in such a way that it forms, these two are in the middle. So in this case, it's actually going to go on the outside. And then back down the top. So just to show you, if we look in here now, very importantly, that the pairs are arranged, but the crossing ligaments are paired. These middle two are inside the outer two, and that means that if the joint twists, it stays more or less stable. And then we just repeat on the other side. So I'm going to pass that back up to the top. It's going to go through there. Pass back up to the top. Down there. And actually pierce the other thread. You don't want to do that. If you pierce the other thread, you can see there's a little hole left now. That's not good. If you do that, then you won't be able to pull the mechanism tight. So you must avoid that happening. Now, of course, it wants to happen because it's formed a hole. in such a way as that these are a pair, so in this case it's going to drop through the middle. And then back up that hole, again without piercing the other, without piercing the rest of the ligament rather. Okay. For this one, it's quite tempting to put the crimp in the middle there. Now it'll be on top, so next time I can build that joint upside down, have it on the inside, or when it is better on the top, or but can do something else to hide that crimp. But for now, that seems a neat way of doing it. So I'm going to put the crimp in there, pull those tight, and crimp it. Okay, last one. It won't go through because of ends, so we're going to keep these to measure them because we want to line them all up to see how long we should have started. Although given what's left, I think 1/2 metre for a single joint is just about right, until you start getting up to production quantities and have to start worrying about centimetres of this stuff. You can pass one like so, and I'm sure there are lots of people out there who have got a lot more experience of crimps than I do. So if you think what I'm doing is a terrible idea, do let me know and we'll come up with a better way of doing it. I'm just going to crimp that with a pair of side cutters now. Guess I'll use my peeling side cutters. As I have a vise, I'm going to use it because it's going to make this a lot easier. If you don't, you're going to have to find some way to hold on to that. But I'm just going to get a vise and then I'm going to crush that while I put it all tight. Okay, and then with these hefty pliers, technically a plumber's wrench, an adjustable plumber's wrench, crush that down. And trim the loose ends just for neatness for now. Okay, so gosh, that's gone nice and tight, but you can still move it around. So, oh yeah, okay, interesting. So there's a significant difference there in how tight I've been able to get those. You can see how resistant that is because of the crossing over. And then it's kind of self-healing. Starting to get a little bit looser. But just by running the joint over its full range, things drop back into the grooves. So that gives you a finger structure. So this could be done tighter clearly. So next one I do, a bit more complicated that one obviously, but next one I do, I'll see if I can make that a bit less loose. And this one perhaps a bit more loose. So I've done that really very tight, but we'll see how that changes over time. That might end up becoming very loose as well, because there's really very little holding anything in place. And yeah, it's terribly strong. Hundreds of pounds it'll take to break that. Certainly, I'm going to break the ligaments. Okay, that is a test finger. It's got yaw at the knuckle. It's got pitch at the knuckle. So, nice rolling joint design. That's so nice rolling joint design with acts as the first draft of the finger. One ligament here going through all 4 rolling joint surfaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, single thread. Down here a separate one, and I suspect it could all be done with one, but this seems a pretty reasonable split. Last finger joint is melded into a single, but this piece could be many, many things. And I suspect the obvious thing is to make it detachable here. I mean, you can really make that into sensorized, soft touch, specialized, pointy, all sorts of stuff. So it will be very general purpose. I will release these immediately, ready to print and have fun.